And it's a big hello to all of you and welcome to VLGA Connect with the weekly governance update brought to you by Hunt and Hunt Lawyers. And Steve Cooper is with me as always. Hi, Steve.
Hello, Chris. How are you?
Good, thanks. You look a bit chilly.
Oh, look, it's been raining here and it is very chilly. And I'm in a chilly spot.
You're in, now tell me about that shirt. You're in Fort William.
Fort William's a beautiful place in Scotland, famous for at least two things, Chris, and possibly more. Reason it's cold is it's right at the base of Ben Nevis, the tallest mountain in the UK. And the other thing is Fort William is platform 9 3/4. So if you want to get on the Harry Potter train, the Jacobite, it's where you go.
I knew that was a Harry Potter reference. Yeah.
And weirdly, we are going to find a way to weave Fort William into one of our yarns today. So I thought I'd better wear this shirt.
Oh, I can't wait. I wonder which one. We've got a long list of yarns today, as always. You must quite seriously be feeling quite warm there with that jacket. And your background looks rather pale. Is that because of the cold, is it?
It is. It was my rather feeble attempt to look a bit cold. Let me just do something else, Chris, while we're there. How's that?
Oh, that's better. You're back in all your pride.
And let me just give a nod to, given that we do hats, and I've actually had acknowledgement from one of our listeners about hats.
Hat of the week.
Sorry, hat of the week. This is a Carrie's beanie.
Oh, good.
And what a fantastic charity. And I always just think, fundraising is really hard at the moment. And some of those, Carrie's does pretty well, but there's a lot of charities, for example, in the brain cancer space that are really struggling. So maybe consider where you put your money.
Oh, that's excellent, Steve. I don't want to show my hat now after that.
I think you should. We need a bit of flippancy.
Here's my hat of the week. This is when I feel like I'd like to remember what it's like to have hair. I put this hat on.
I can only imagine going through your mind when you purchased that, Chris, or not.
I was just looking at the look on your face. This one goes back quite some years. I was traveling America with family, and I was dared to buy this when I saw it and tried it on. I'd suggest maybe some alcohol was involved because clearly I did. And this will surprise you, Steve. I don't wear it very often.
Who knew? Actually, Chris, there's a message there for our younger listeners about decision making.
Absolutely. But it comes out every now and then when we talk about hats. So there you go. That's my hat of the week. I call it my Andre Agassi hat. Something about it at the time called to mind.
Although the difference is, I've got to say, Andre sort of matured and grew over time. I'm not sure that hat does.
Yeah, okay, I'll give you that one. Now, seeing as you've allowed me to go there, tennis, I'm not sure if you've noticed, it's in the news at the moment, and I'd say it's in the news for all the wrong reasons. Although there's been some really good tennis this week as well. But as we record, we're still waiting for the immigration minister to make a call on Novak Djokovic and his visa and status to be in the country. As I know you were, was thinking about this whole process. How did we get here, Steve? And did you watch the court proceedings on Monday?
I managed to turn on right at the very... I tried to watch it various times and it was just overloaded consistently, but I turned on after 5 just as the orders were being read. And there was some quite incredible judge speak went on, Chris. I particularly liked the part where the barrister for the government, as a courtesy, alerted the judge to the fact that the other minister, Minister Hawke, might make it a personal determination no matter what the decision of the court might be. And the judge respected the courtesy of the message and then said, I'm glad you, or words to the effect of, I'm glad you told me because had you not, I would have been incandescent.
Incandescent is exactly, yes, that one jumped out at me too, Steve. But to bring this back, I guess, to a local government theme, if you like, I think there's some really salient messages out of this about due process, procedural fairness, just getting that process right. I've been annoyed by some of the commentary that has taken the court ruling to mean, Novak is vindicated.
No.
But it was really just a question of procedural fairness had been denied, and therefore the judge basically said the quashing of the visa was nullified.
Absolutely, Chris, and it's really important to walk and chew gum at the same time, or even to think and breathe. This whole issue fell on the reasonableness of the actions of the delegated officer. And I think apparently in the morning the judge had said, what more would you expect the man to do? At 4 o'clock in the morning, when he was asked to provide more information, and said, well, people are asleep, he was given until 8:30, then called back into a room at 6 o'clock, not having had that opportunity. So where this landed was that the merits of the visa application were never heard, because it was found that the delegate had behaved unreasonably, if you like, towards Novak Djokovic.
Flash forward 5 days, and we're still waiting on the outcome from that. Very interesting yesterday to see the draw due to happen for the Australian Open, and then deferred for an hour and a quarter, it turned out, and then ultimately went ahead with Novak in the draw. The longer this goes on, the messier that it looks. So we just hope we get an outcome.
It is unseemly, Chris. Just to really reinforce your point, though, the message for me with local government is sometimes when councils are involved in decision-making, administrative decisions, whether it's permit issue or a prosecution decision, there's a backstory, and it might be that someone seemed to have behaved in a way that's difficult, and that can cloud the decision. And the removal of the political element from that administrative decision-making is absolutely vital, and constantly checking on that's important. The other thing I thought was really interesting in it, Chris, was there was a lot of talk about the federal government being a model litigant.
Yeah.
And model litigancy is like, don't waste the time of the court, and also that government shouldn't use its power because, government's better resourced usually than the people we're in court with or in a process with, and it would be easy to use that power to get the predetermined outcome. Now, it's very easy to be a model litigant in a case involving Novak Djokovic because he had 2 QCs on his side. The challenge is being a model litigant when the other side isn't well resourced and not taking advantage of that. The benefit of really sticking to those model litigancy principles is that in those processes you build up better practices, and it pays off in the long term.
Couldn't agree more. And shall we say there's your tennis lesson for this week?
Game set. Oh no, it's not game set and match yet. It could be John Eisner, and who is the other fella at Wimbledon?
Nicholas Mahut.
Thank
they
you.
Played 37-35 or something like that in the 5th set, which is why Wimbledon now doesn't have that. They have a tiebreak in the 5th set at 12-all now.
Crashing tradition, I think, Chris, but anyway.
Absolutely.
Moving on.
Moving on to another matter that's been played out and is still, we should say, playing out in a civil sense, I believe, the I Cook Foods matter involving Dandenong and by extension involving the Knox City Council. I just want to draw your attention to a statement made by the Greater Dandenong CEO, John Benny, last Friday, advising that the police investigation had concluded with no charges recommended. And I thought John's statement was really interesting and worth looking at. As I read it, it just really brought home to me how difficult, stressful, demanding this whole thing must have been for not just his team, but for all the parties involved. A police investigation, 2 parliamentary inquiries, an ombudsman inquiry, ultimately no wrongdoing on the part of the council. And Mr. Benny said, in future, perhaps we could have less conspiracy and more balance. And I thought that was really measured and appropriate for this time in the process. What say you, Steve?
I'd say I agree completely, and I really enjoyed the summary that you gave of that matter in the roundup, Chris. We've talked about this before, about the difficulty of really unpacking it while there is still a civil suit on foot. And I'm not sure when that matter will hit the Supreme Court of Victoria, but obviously it will progress at some point. And ultimately, when all's said and done, the only things that matter are the evidence that's led in that matter and what the judge determines. I would just say in passing, though, and it's just a bit of a note, There was a piece in the Herald Sun last week as well in regard to the matters you've talked about. The piece was quite critical of the Knox City Council in regard to the management of an FOI request for information that was pertinent to the upcoming case. And my reading of the FOI Act, and Hunt and Hunt lawyers would know better than me, would be that, typically speaking, material that is germane to an upcoming legal proceeding would be one of the excluded categories from an FOI claim. And rather than, if someone's aggrieved by an FOI decision, rather than put something in the paper, I would have thought running off to the Administrative Appeals Tribunal and testing that might be the place to go.
I haven't seen the story, but would I be right in guessing that sense of nuance and balance that you've just provided was not present in the Herald Sun story?
I suspect that the conspiratorial tones to which Mr. Benny alluded may have been present in that article. And editors get to publish what editors publish. Good on them. But yeah, that was just my little fact check.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I was honestly checking, but not surprised. They also ran a story this week about the troubles at another Melbourne council. It's in the Herald Sun, I may as well name it, Darebin. And there was just this throwaway comment about discussing the potential to leak information about the CEO's lavish pay package. And I just thought, yep, typical Herald Sun. Here we go again. Just a comment. Don't really need to go anywhere with that.
No, we might just... No, I have no desire at all, Chris. Yeah.
Waste delays, other service impacts. So with Omicron running riot, and I hate to see these numbers still going up, but they are. The agility, can we put it that way, and flexibility of council management and service delivery teams at the moment just has to be so finely tuned. And I know everyone's at the end of their rope, but they're doing awesome work just to be able to keep things going for the community. I saw a bit of sensational stuff about one council saying, your bins mightn't be collected for 24 hours. I mean, seriously, big deal. I'm sure most people can deal with that in the current environment. Wouldn't you think?
Chris, shout out to communities generally, because the feedback I've had this week is that the blowback at a community level has been very minimal. People have understood that if you haven't got a workforce, your bin's not going to be picked up, or you prioritise what might be hazardous. If a bin stays out for a day or two longer, as you say, it will be collected. In the scheme of things, it's pretty low level. And issues been raised, dealt with. Hopefully over time, there'll be a bit less of it.
Yeah, I know my council put out a note to say your green bin might not be collected for up to a week. So please don't panic, don't report it unless it's been there for a week. So what's the upshot of that? It sits out there beside my driveway for a few extra days. I'm hardly going to get overly upset about that when people are dealing with really serious COVID-related issues.
Absolutely, yeah.
Working down my list, now you're going to have to tell me where Fort William comes in, Steve, because I've forgotten where you're going to make that link.
A garden party, Chris.
Well, here we are. We've arrived at the garden, but was it a garden party? And were you there? And would you even know you were there unless you were told you were there after the completion of investigation? We're talking about the Downing Street garden party.
Yes, the Downing Street garden party. So there is an absolute scandal in the UK. If anyone hasn't picked up any international news lately, the Prime Minister Boris Johnson is under great duress. And we are going to take this story back to not only Fort William, but also to a local government context as well.
Good.
Chris.
I'll be looking for that, yes.
Yeah. So while the UK was in the height of its COVID conniptions with lots of illness and death, the suggestion is that a garden party was held for the staff, for about 100 staff in the backyard at number 10 Downing Street. But as you say, on that scale of party, work function, work event, working party, where did it sit? And it was there.
So to me, I see parallels to this with the Novak Djokovic situation, Steve. Can you see where I'm going with this?
The parallel I see is one rule for some and not for others.
That's part of it. Whatever the event was, it clearly should not have occurred.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Whatever the situation with Novak Djokovic and his travel arrangements and declarations and visa and who approved and who didn't, etc., none of it needed to occur if he'd just gotten vaccinated.
Yes.
That's the parallel that I see.
Yes.
So to see these stupid things on Twitter with MPs talking about rocking up with their rosé and whether they might have had a sausage roll or not, and then trying to determine, well, was it a work function or was it a party? And I don't know until someone tells me what it was because there's an investigation. It's just the height of nonsense. Have you seen that particular video?
And I now know who is it. Rosie Hodge, one of the English comedians, has
Rosie
done an outstanding parody. But effectively, of Boris Johnson saying, "Well, I don't know if I was there, but when I see the Sue Gray report, I will know." And we probably should talk about Sue Gray.
That's right. Yeah, it's hilarious stuff. And there's a few parodies doing the rounds, as you pointed out, but there's also some true videos doing the rounds with politicians that look like parodies. That's how something it's become.
It is quite blurred. So the really interesting part is Sue Gray is apparently a very senior British public servant who has conducted investigations previously that have very adversely affected the impact of the career, adversely affected the careers of those who have been investigated. So Sue Gray has been tasked to investigate what went on at this party, and it is now the Sue Gray investigation. Like, it's just become a thing of its own language. The bit for me, though, that takes it back to local government and Fort William is that a man called Ian Blackford is the leader of the Scottish National Party in the House of Commons. Ian Blackford, so here's the link, is the member for Ross, Skye and Lochaber, which is basically an electorate, for anyone that knows Scotland, that starts at Glencoe, work your way north along the western shore of Loch Ness and all points east, and stop just before Inverness. So some beautiful country, which includes the Isle of Skye, the iconic Island Donnan Castle, gorgeous stuff. Ian Blackford asked a really good question in the House, and the question was Sue Gray invited to the party? Now, isn't that a cracking question?
Yeah. What's the answer?
Dominic Raab, on behalf of the Prime Minister, stood to answer the question and basically impugned Ian Blackford for asking it and said that Sue Gray is a fine public servant and it's a terrible thing that you would impugn the outcome of her investigation. This is my words, not his. And he never got round to answering the question of, was she invited to the party? Now, Chris, I don't know. I would lean to the view that if she was invited to the party, at least that should be given an airing. And if it's not a conflict of interest, it should be disclosed. But for me, that's the sort of thing that actually erodes trust in government. And it's the sort of response to conflict of interest questions that gets people into strife down the track.
Well, all I can say is I can't think about this matter without hearing Ricky Nelson in the background in my head singing Garden Party now, Steve. Thanks
Chris,
to you.
Apparently the Prime Minister's just released a statement, Boris Johnson.
Yes. And what does it say?
He said, it's all right now. I've learned my lesson well. You can't please everyone, but you've got to please yourself. And then he released a subsequent one saying, da-da-da-da. So there. I think you might be in trouble.
Boom, boom. Full marks to you for that one. Shall we move on?
Yeah, we should.
Couple of serious notes coming up, but firstly, I do want to delve into the mailbag. We had some correspondence this week, Steve, from a viewer, I believe, who wrote to us saying, long-time viewer, first time writer of the name of Nigel Mainwaring. I do believe, in fact, I'm strongly suspicious that that's a nom de plume for someone.
It's very careless of Nigel to use the email account of John Lloyd Fillingham, our rather excellent production man, but...
Oh, I thought he was just passing it on from a fair income viewer. You've shattered my illusions. So Nigel has drawn our attention to a story out of the UK again in Northamptonshire. I know you've looked into this a little bit more closely, Steve, and Mr. Mainwaring would like to hear your thoughts on this. What's the story here?
Oh, look, Chris, I don't know that we've got necessarily the time to do the whole story, but fundamentally, a former council, which has now been amalgamated, prosecuted the owner of a pub over some food safety breaches. He was unable to actually the pub was the Snooty Fox in Kettering, and it's a terrific name. He as a consequence of these prosecutions, and can I say really clearly, Chris, there is absolutely positively no comparison to be drawn between this and Dandenong. It just happens that we're talking about them on the same day. Do not make a link, because what we're about to talk about is quite different. And I would also say in this particular case, the matters have been tested in court, which is a big distinction.
Okay. Yes.
So Jeffrey Monks was imprisoned because he couldn't pay his fines. He found himself in a cell next to a notorious serial killer, which wasn't good. But subsequently had the prosecutions overturned. And the evidence that was led in court were that I've got to be really careful how I say this, the CEO of the council of the day was in a very close, intimate personal relationship with a local lawyer who had had an argument with Mr. Monks in the pub over a bottle of wine that she thought that the bottle of German hock that she was given didn't match the quality of the Bordeaux that she was actually expecting. There is a suggestion that, in fact, the prosecution was subsequently led by the CEO, who was very actively involved. Again, quite different to the Dandenong situation. The really interesting part for me, and I've just got to find the quote, in the court case, the QC for Dr. Monks said he achieved the remarkable distinction of being the defendant to three of only a handful of food safety prosecutions the council had undertaken between 1990 and 2001, during which period it had carried out over 7,000 investigations. So
They're extremely unlucky or something else?
Extremely unlucky that all of the other premises had such high food standards. All of those other 6,995 didn't warrant prosecution, and his was one of a handful that did, and which would ring an alarm bell, I think. Yeah.
So ultimately, Dr. Monks has been awarded damages, or the council's agreed to pay damages, and I believe it's the first time in 150 years that damages have been awarded or will be paid for an abusive process.
Yeah, that's right. And the my understanding, Chris, is the basis of the damages is a quite obscure legal principle around the fact that the prosecution action by the council was ill-founded and, indeed for the wrong purpose, quite malicious, which again goes back to all of these administrative decisions that are made, that you have to start with, what are we trying to achieve here?
Yeah.
And
then this one brings in, not dissimilar to stuff we've been talking about already in relation to procedural fairness and due process. This also brings in potentially conflict of interest type considerations. All of those
absolutely.
things that need to be top of mind and considered when you're undertaking such a process.
Absolutely. Yeah, and so arm's length, cool head, where does the public interest lie, become really important conversations. But it is an extraordinary yarn, Chris.
I'll put a link to that in the show notes for people who'd like to have a closer look at that. So that's not a tennis lesson. What's that? That's another lesson entirely. Okay. Another one from the lesson book. Now, a couple of things to note. I do want to note with sadness, Steve, we just found out yesterday, in fact, of the death of Troy Pickard. Troy was the mayor of Joondalup in Western Australia for 11 years, 2006 to 2017. He was also the president of VLGA and for a time the president of ALGA. I met him in both capacities when he was president of ALGA and was the mayor of Joondalup. CEOs and mayors sometimes do trips around other jurisdictions to share notes, talk about challenges, etc. So my personal experience was a really nice guy, straight shooter, only 48, no details on how and why this has occurred at this stage, Steve, but I certainly do want to note Troy's passing as a very sad note for the local government family.
And your comments have been echoed generally in commentary around the media, Chris. So yes, I didn't know Troy, but I would echo that. He certainly has a strong legacy.
And coming up, looking at the calendar, next week we've got 2 countbacks happening, Alpine Shire and Yarra Rangers. They'll be online on Wednesday morning for those tragics that like to follow those things, 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock respectively. And my mail has it that Yarra Ambiac will appoint its acting CEO next week, which it needs to do because Jesse Holmes finishes next week at Yarra Ambiac, and we're keeping an eye on that CEO movement list as the year starts to kick into gear. And I know you've noticed, Steve, there's an important paper out for consultation at the moment nationally.
Yeah, I don't know that we need to spend too much time on this, Chris, except to say I noticed this morning that the draft national plan to end violence against women for 2022 to 2032 has been put out this morning for consultation. A significant, vitally important document, not only to the basically one woman a week who is a fatality due to family violence, the thousands of other people who are adversely affected, the state of our society. This is a really critical paper. The consultation period is a fortnight. I'll leave it there.
Sorry, 2 weeks, you say?
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Is it a really short document? Have you looked at it?
I've got to say, Chris, I was so gobsmacked. I found it. I found the website with no explainer that went straight to the document and noted it was open for a fortnight.
I think your first instinct to just leave that there is the correct one. Won't say too much more till we have a look. 2 weeks, folks. Ending violence against women. We're going to do it in 2 weeks. Okay. Steve, thank you. I think I've exhausted my list. Anything else from you?
No, I think we've possibly finished on the appropriate tone, Chris.
All right. Thank you. Thank you to Hunt & Lawyers, our sponsors, as always. Thank you to our viewers and listeners. I've had a few people get in touch this week saying, nice to come back to work with the discussion that we had last week. Of course, we've got lots of best of editions of VLGA Connect out on YouTube and podcast at the moment. If you want to catch up on some of those conversations we had last year that you might have missed first time around. And Steve, what's happening for you this week? Anything exciting?
Just back into the routine. What I should say, Chris, is we're well into the planning of Fast Track 2022 on the 18th of March. Registrations are open. We've got most of the panels locked in. It is going to be a fantastic day. So for mayors, deputy mayors and councillors, please consider, and that'll exercise a bit of my time next week. And
still a face-to-face event at this point, Steve? I imagine you're keeping a watching brief on that.
Yeah, and we're pretty confident, given the way things are going, that we'll be able to proceed with that at the Park Hyatt, as I said, on the 18th of March, Chris, face-to-face. It'll be great.
Excellent. Looking forward to it. Thanks, Steve. Catch up next week. Steve Cooper, Chief of Staff of the VLGA. That's your governance update in the can for another week. Thanks for your company, and we'll see you again soon.